40 years since the bodies of two young women were found brutally slain just months
apart. A major
apart.
break in a 42-year-old cold case. A suspect finally under arrest in the deaths of two young women.
There has been a significant change in a cold case that's been going on for 42 years. A suspect who was wanted in connection with the deaths of two young women has finally been caught. Both women, who lived in Oxnard, California, but did not know each other, were brutally killed in 1981 in a similar fashion. However, it's not clear whether this was the work of one or two people. Let's have a look at the 42-year-old case finally solved in 2023. In today's case, we go to Oxnard, California, which has a beautiful coastline and a lot of chances for young adults. It has a lot of interesting sites, like the Carnegie Art Museum in the middle, which shows modern California art. We don't know much about her bigger brother, Roy Rodriguez's early life. Still, we know that by the time Rachel started making money alone, Roy was already well off. Rachel was still in her teens when she married and had two daughters. Since things weren't going well with her husband, she left him at age 20 in 1980. Rachel wasn't rich, so she would have to start working after the divorce to support herself and her two girls. In 1981, a year after the birth of her youngest daughter, she was finally free from her bad marriage. But she didn't just walk away. Rachel had difficulty juggling her responsibilities, so she hired several babysitters to watch her two kids. At the same time, she worked or went to school. She would go to college, work her night shifts, and then come home in the evening. The babysitters would only go home when Rachel got home. If it was too late, Rachel would often drive them home herself. When the police did an autopsy, they found that Rachel had been choked to death and had been beaten up before she was killed. The cops wanted to see the killer as soon as possible because the crime was wrong. They thought that Rachel was attacked outside her brother's house in Camarillo, put in a car and driven away. According to her neighbors and brother, Rachel had gone to drop off the babysitters the night before after getting home from work as she usually did. But on that particular day, something terrible happened when she got out of her car at home. There were many things that could have been heard or seen at the crime scene that could help cops figure out what happened. Lisa got a job at a store in Oxnard's Esplanade shopping center that sold clothing for teens. She worked there for almost a year, but she had no idea that her life was about to end in a terrible way. On December 12, 1981, a fire at a flat was reported by calling 911. When the firefighters arrived, they tried to stop the damage as best they could, but they were horrified to find a naked dead woman in the building. When the cops arrived, they knew immediately that the victim was Lisa Gandick. She was 21 years old when she died. After getting the necessary DNA evidence from the crime scene, the autopsy showed that Lisa had been violently attacked before she was killed. The marks on her neck from being strangled were the same as those on Rachel's body. Whoever did it choked Lisa and then set her flat on fire to cover their tracks. No one knows who could have done such a horrible thing. More studies show that Lisa's neighbors heard her screaming, but they didn't call 911 until they smelled smoke coming from her apartment right before she died. Lisa had just told her mother that she would be home for Christmas. Since there had been two killings in Oxnard in the past year, she could no longer make it. The cops were under a lot of pressure to find out who did both crimes. Still, it was hard to figure out what was going on. Detectives working on Lisa's murder case found that none of the people they had questioned were likely suspects. Since they had no other leads to follow, they had to give up on the case. It got cold too, just like Rachel's case had. In 2004, 23 years after Lisa's and Rachel's death, DNA technology made it easier to solve cold cases. This was a simple process because all that needed to be done was to put the DNA evidence into the national systems and wait for the results. Since they had important evidence from both crime scenes, the police and investigators in Oxnard who were working on these two cases chose to use this chance to solve them. As they looked over the paperwork from both cases, they saw that there were parallels between the two murders. The first was that the body had marks on them. Lisa's and Rachel's marks were almost identical, and they were both attacked and choked in horrible ways. The second thing they had in common was that they had both been to a pub called Huntington's right before they died. Even though it's closed now, the pub was a popular place to hang out right next to the Esplanade Mall, which is where Lisa used to work. The system did not have any matches when the DNA data from both crime scenes were uploaded. Still, the DNA was the same as the sample from the other case. When the police saw similarities between Lisa and Rachel's deaths, they decided that the same person had killed both of them. This meant that the crimes against Lisa and Rachel were done by the same person, who was still at large. The problem was that no one fit the description of a suspect that the cops were looking for. Soon, the case went cold again because there was no information about the suspect in the national systems. Even after almost 40 years, no one knows who killed Lisa and Rachel. Even though the police found out that there was only one person to blame instead of two, they were still unable to move forward with the case. Detectives and police cops who are looking into these two murders in a cold case decided to work with DNA genealogists to try find a link. As a result of the search for the suspect in 2019, the closed cases are now being looked into again. This time, the agents looked at DNA profiles that were sent in by users and were easy to find. They thought that this was a good start because it would give them enough information to find out more about their family background and maybe even track down the suspect. Together, the group was able to narrow their search down to a single person. Also, the clues found at the 1981 crime scene matched this person. He was known as Tony Garcia, and at the time he was 68 years old. He came into the world in 1955. He was born in the state of New Mexico. As he grew up, he joined the Navy. Tony worked as a karate teacher in Oxnard, California after he was done with the Army. After keeping track of Tony's age and location in 1981, the Ventura police found that he was 26 years old and often went to Huntington's. He saw Rachel there and started to go after her. On January 18, 1981, he showed up out of the blue and killed her. Lisa used to go to the same pub where Rachel was killed after she was killed, which contributed to her death about 11 months later. After these things were found out, more background checks on Tony showed that he worked as a carpenter after the killings in 1981. Tony stayed in the same place the whole time, which was even more amazing. He moved to Oxnard and stayed there for a long time after doing these awful things. During the time that Rachel and Lisa's deaths were being looked into, he was able to stay hidden. But why didn't the cops in Ventura think he was strange? Well, no one knew who he was until 2019, when DNA proof from the crime scene proved it. Even after it was found out in 2019 that Tony had killed the people, he could stay free for another 4 years. No one was able to find him. In February 2023, police in Ventura County arrested Garcia and charged him with 2 counts of murder and 2 special charges. These claims included killings, kidnappings, and sexual assaults that were forced. The district attorney's office, on the other hand, could not decide between the death penalty and a life sentence in prison without parole. The 68-year-old man was taken into custody in February 2023, and bail was set at $2 million. Do you think the right thing was done? If you like our video, please hit that like button and tell us what you think in the comment section below. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get updates whenever we upload a new video. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.